good morning also from my side. And first of all, let me express my appreciation to all of you that came here to listen this conference, and obviously to all our panelists that gave a very important contribution today, and in particular our panelists coming from abroad that was so ready and open to share their experience with us. This is the second conference that we had. The President highlighted that this would like to be a regular occasion for sharing views and touch base on where we are going. I tend to think that today, you know, considering all the arguments, consideration that has been put on the table, we managed to achieve this objective. Obviously, we don't have solutions to the problems, but I think knowing which are the issues is the first step toward the solution. So thank you all very much. What to say? I will be brief because actually this session separates all of us from the lunch and the nice weather in Rome. The President Rossi posed a question today. So, is this increased complexity brought about by the regulation and in the context of the current scenario, just reflecting the complexity, or with the regulation we are adding new unnecessary layer of complexity? Finding the solution is very difficult, but I think that especially in the first panel we got some positive aspects, positive views, in the sense that maybe the glass is half full and not half empty, and so it is important maybe to continue in the direction that we took. It is true that we need time. You know, Karel said that Rome was not built in a day. I would say we should, in any case, to hurry up and not to spend the same time where built our thinking in Rome now. So we should go ahead with decision. We highlighted that Solvency II is a good framework that helps the supervisor to detect earlier the concentration of risk and the problems that the company could have, in the interest of finding supervisory intervention which are efficient and effective in the protection of the interest of the policyholder. It is good, I think, also for the companies, because actually gives certain incentive to the companies that are in line, at least in principle, with economic incentives. Certainly, especially from the second panel, we see that there are some aspects which are not working exactly in the right direction, but I think we should continue to work on limiting the undesired effect of Solvency II rather than changing the fundamentals of Solvency II. Where I think it would be a mistake to move from a risk-based, abandon a risk-based system just for having a system which is more simple, more enforceable, and at the end that could be easier for everybody. So how to strike a balance between having a system which is sophisticated, risk-sensitive, but at the same time enforceable, that is not creating problem to the companies as a whole, and in particular for small companies, as we saw today, because small companies should have a role in the market. And we saw and we hear today that companies could have an important role also in satisfying, the need for diversity that the consumers would like to have. So I also now I don't have a solution for that. I can say what we are trying to do in IVASS for striking this balance and not creating this bureaucratic monster that has been mentioned this morning, again, without abandoning the benefits that this system could have. And we also hear this morning that when we speak about proportionality, we speak about regulatory proportionality and supervisory proportionality. I think this is a key distinction to make. Regulation could include some embedded in itself some aspects for good, for simplification, for calibrating the intensity of the requirements depending on the risk and the dimension of the companies. And this is something that, as Gabriel said, we in Europe can still work on, and we can improve certain aspects in the revision of the SCR, for example, by making reference to this concept of impact, on materiality of certain calculation that certain calculation could have. We in IVASS, as far as the regulation is concerned, we have tried to not to abandon the principle-based approach of Solvency II. So I'm very well aware that you have been overwhelmed by an incredible number of regulation, a lot of pages and pages of regulation. But if you want, paradoxically, this is because we didn't want to set rules. It's much more difficult to explain what is, for example, the prudent person approach in dealing with the asset management. It would be much easier to set rules, to set limits for the allocation of the assets. But I think this would not be Solvency II anymore. So, yes, we spent more time for explaining what are those principles. Maybe we have been complicated sometimes, but we are ready to refine over time all those complexity. So I think it's good not to abandon this principle-based approach in order to get simplification. The other point is that yes, we should leave the principles to be applied by the supervision. And this is the second side of proportionality. Proportionality means, first of all, having certain behavior, both from the company and the industry and the supervisor point of view. And this is the most difficult part of the proportionality. Because, in the application of those principles, that should leave a certain flexibility in order to define the right solution for the specific situation. The use of this flexibility creates problems, because the discretion used could be too much by supervisor, could be too low, and the use of discretion could not be the same across Europe. So you create a consistency problem. So I think the use of discretion, the way in which this new relationship between the company and the supervisor is carried out is certainly the aspects in which there is more room for improvements. And I would say that we are very well aware of that as a supervisor, and we are ready to make progress on that. First of all, by making our expectation more clear. You know, supervisory expectation, I understand that if you have a general principle, you can have a lack of certainty about what in concrete terms a company should do. We should try to limit this uncertainty by making clear which are our expectations. And we are trying to do that with communications, issues paper, what we call letteral mercato. But we would like also to disclose more, to disclose which are our guides for supervision. So we are working now on what we call Guida di Vigilanza, which is a kind of handbook for supervisors, and sharing this handbook, at least part of this handbook, with the companies could certainly give indication to the companies about what we think the company should do in certain circumstances. The ORSA is another key instrument for setting a dialogue between companies and supervisors. We would like to exploit the ORSA as far as possible. So now our efforts are made on defining how the ORSA should be done, but the ORSA is not a report. The ORSA is a process, and is also a dialogue between companies and supervisors. We would like to use this ORSA, and based on the ORSA, allow the company to explain why certain decision has been taken, why a certain way in which the proportionality has been applied, and on the other side, we should give the possibility to the supervisor to challenge those decisions. So this is for giving you the idea that also in terms of supervision, we will be very keen to apply the principle of proportionality. On the other side, as I said also last year, we need the company which are open to this dialogue, which are transparent enough to explain their decision to the supervisor. And first of all, that we need company that apply the principles of Solvency II in an appropriate way. Proportionality doesn't mean not applying the principles. So we still need an appropriate calculation of technical provision, even though calculation of technical provision could be simplified in certain situations. Luckily, there are limited cases, but we see that on these, considering that how key is the role of technical provision is in Solvency II, there are still problems on that. Embedded option in technical provision are difficult to be calculated. We know that, but this should not be a reason for not calculating at all embedded options. So this for giving you an idea that we also need help from the companies in order to carry out an appropriate application of proportionality. I would also highlight a couple of specific things that came out from the second panel, and the fact that rightly has been mentioned that in this new scenario we should also think about new products. And let me, as I often said to the Dottoressa Farina, we are more than ready to see, as far as we are concerned, to help in designing new products that could better address the current challenges of the current scenario and satisfy the request of the consumers, at the same time making the insurance contract still insurance products without taking off their natures. In the second panel, we also spoke about, obviously, this issue of sovereign. You know our position on sovereign. Gabriel knows our position. We cannot say, as it was mentioned this morning, that it is not a risk in terms of spread risk. Default risk is another issue. But in terms of spread risk, is a risk that should be tackled by the companies. We think that the Pillar 2 aspects is a way for tackling this risk into account, checking whether the company, even in cases of artificial changes of the spread, widening of the spread, is capable to hold the assets and not to be forced to realize the losses. Also, another shortcoming of Solvency II that has been mentioned is the issue of volatility. The issue of volatility is certainly a shortcoming of Solvency II. Otherwise, is also a natural product of the risk sensitiveness of Solvency II. Would be very difficult to assess and mitigate risks without market consistent valuation of assets and liabilities. But on the other side, we consider that artificial volatilities or excessive volatility should be tackled, should be compensated. So for this reason, when Solvency II has been established, we have pushed for having long-term measures which are effective enough. And we will continue to work with the EIOPA on that for possibly improving the effectiveness of these measures in order to eliminate the effect of excessive volatility in the market. Last points that I wanted to highlight, we have spoken very much about the scenario, the market scenario of the insurtech, digitalization, and so on. Obviously, this is still driven by market forces, but as far as the IVASS is concerned, let me assure you that we are paying a lot of attention of any impact that this development could have to the protection of consumers and to the sound functioning of the market. So we are trying to look at those aspects, at those scenarios with a holistic approach, taking into account both the impact on prudential aspects and the impact on market conduct aspects. It's certainly challenging also for the supervisory authority. Gabriel knows, because also in Europe, in EIOPA, we are working on that. We will have to speak again, certainly about those issues. And very last point about convergence of supervisory authorities that has been highlighted very much. You know, we are fully aware that we should ensure level playing field in Italy and in Europe and possibly in the globe. Any position that we have taken has been taken based on this awareness. And we are very keen to work with the IOPA in order to ensure consistent approach in regulation and possibly consistent approach in the day-to-day supervisory practices. It is not easy, but I concur with what very passionately Gabriel said this morning, that we should work together in order to be stronger together and at the end achieve our institutional objective, which is the protection of consumers. I will stop here. I would like again to thank all of you for being here. Thank again our guests and give you maybe an appointment to the next conference. We will have a lot of issues for the next conference. I don't know when we will be able to organize that, but I think as soon as possible, because I think these dialogues are very important. Maybe we could focus, besides, checking how implementation of Solvency II is going on, we should focus more maybe on the role of insurance for the economy. And also in this context to focus on which are the risks that the insurance sector as a whole could compensate, in the sense of being a rebalancing of systemic risk, or could amplify in terms of impacting the systemic risk a bit more. But we will let certainly know about these future plans. So thank you again, and have a nice afternoon. I hope you enjoyed the conference.